Dave Palumbo with an RX Muscle news update. Sad news in the bodybuilding world. The great Ed Corney has passed at 85 years of age. For those of you who might have remembered from the Pumping Iron movies, Ed Corney was the guy that Arnold was sitting and talking to his friend and saying how great of a poser he was. Everyone was just going crazy over Ed Corney's amazing posing in that movie, and I think that's probably an iconic scene that people will remember probably for the rest of their lives. And Ed, a lot of people don't realize Ed wasn't a young man in this movie. You know, he was one of the older guys, but he was just so fluid on stage. And I didn't know, obviously, Ed back in these days because I really wasn't into bodybuilding. I was a kid at this point. But later in life, I met Ed after he had had his stroke at a couple bodybuilding events. And I used to interview him all the time on RX Muscle. And he would always show me how strong he was. He would do some kind of like, I don't know, like a pose, or he'd be like, feel my lat or feel my arm. And I remember a couple booths he was at. I think he was at the Europa booth. He would lift like a dumbbell, and he was showing me how he was shrugging like 100-pound dumbbells like after a stroke. And the truth was that he really did get himself much better. I don't know if he actually was walking, freely at any point, but he definitely, a lot of people thought he was never going to recover from that stroke, but he really credits bodybuilding to bringing him back from the brink of death. And in 1977, he was actually second at the Mr. Olympia, right behind Frank Zane, who won that show. That was a pretty amazing thing if you think about it, to be second place at the Olympia. You got to put him up there with the likes of Kevin Levrone and Flex Wheeler. I mean, he was right there on the verge of winning the Olympia title. He actually did get an Olympia title back in, I believe it was 1995. I think he won the actually in 94 and 95, he won the Masters 60 plus Olympia. So he did get his Olympia medal after all at the 60 and over category. There was no one who even challenged him. There was no one at that time who was as good as he was at 60 years old. You got to remember, 60 years old back in the early 90s, it was unheard of. No one was bodybuilding then, and he still looked great. He was ripped. You could see the pictures of him. Obviously nowadays we have a lot of 60-year-old guys that are much better, but that was 20 years ago. Guys weren't even living to 60 years old back then. You were lucky if you lived past 60. Ed just lived the bodybuilding lifestyle, and I don't really think his death was a sad one. He was 85. He lived a full life. He really believed in the principles of bodybuilding to not only dictate how his life went, but to dictate how everything he did. He believed that the hard work ethic of bodybuilding and eating right and training and taking supplementation was what allowed him to live such a successful life. I don't know what caused his stroke, but obviously he really believes that the bodybuilding lifestyle allowed him to come back from that, because a lot of people might have, that might have been the end of them there. And Ed lived a really full life after that. Like I said, every time I met him at a show, he loved when I would come over. He'd give me a hug. We would take a picture together. I got to pull some pictures and put them up on the forums and on the Facebook page just so people can see. Ed was a great guy. I remember talking to him at the Masters Olympia one year, not when he was competing. I think he was just there making an appearance, and he was like, oh man, he really missed being on stage. You could tell this was a guy, I could care less about ever competing again now that I'm 50. In his 60s, he wanted to be up there on that stage. That's what he loved to do more than anything. And he'll always be remembered. Like I said, that iconic scene in Pumping Iron can never be taken away from him. That was his Olympia in my mind. And Ed, I just want to say from all the people here at RX Muscle, I hope you're looking down on us and smiling. We all miss you. You're gone, but never forgotten. Ed Corney, we love you. And I just want to say once again from everyone here at RX Muscle, I send out my prayers to his family.